Hello there and welcome along to another mixed martial arts conversation for Sky Sports, looking ahead to the big UFC heavyweight showdown, the rematch between Stipe Miocic, the champion, against Francis Ngannou. Very pleased to say that combat sports journalist, a man steeped in MMA himself, Gareth Davies, joins us once again. Gareth, before we get into the nitty-gritty, how excited are you about a heavyweight title fight and the intrigue of a rematch?
Well, I mean, for a start, Stipe Miocic is the most decorated UFC heavyweight in history. He's had 9 fights in the last 5 years, and he's only lost to Daniel Cormier once. And he's had a trilogy with Daniel Cormier, and he's held the belt. He's already beaten Francis Ngannou. When these 265-pound men fight with 4-ounce gloves, Francis Ngannou has hands the size of shovels, Ed, literally. So if he flicks you with one of those little fingers, he can literally just wobble you and send you into the chicken walk. It's always exciting when the heavyweights fight each other in UFC. And it's always exciting when it's a rematch, particularly of this nature, because it was a fascinating first fight. And I don't know whether Stipe Miocic can climb all over Ngannou like he did the last time, because you let Ngannou have space and throw punches at you, and if he lands, he's just going to knock you out. It's as simple as that.
Well, there's a lot hinge on that. We'll get into Stipe's legacy as well in just a second and his place in the record books. But does that hinge the intrigue here on Ngannou's development in MMA? Because we know he had a boxing background. Do you feel that he's come on since that first fight? That is one of the intangibles here.
Yeah, definitely. He has come on. We know that about him. He had a terrible 2018. He had the loss to Stipe Miocic. Then he fought Derek Lewis. And I was at that fight between those two. And Derek the Beast Lewis and Francis Ngannou were they both had injuries. This is a famous fight. I think 19 strikes at each other were thrown in 15 minutes. In fact, in the end, I remember being kind of octagon side for that, and we were begging in our minds for them not to throw a single punch in the last 5 minutes as they circled each other to make a record fight. And it was one of the most bizarre spectacles. Because Derek the Beast Lewis is a terribly feared fighter as well, and they just couldn't. They just could not pull the trigger that night, both of them. And he lost on points, Francis Ngannou. He was just frozen. His fists were just frozen there the whole time. And they just literally walked around each other. It was the most odd thing because they're so feared. So he had a terrible 2018. But then he's come back with 4 wins since, all by TKO or KO. He's got more poise in the octagon. He's been trained better. He's not the raw product he was at the beginning, this kind of life-size truck who hits people. His body's extraordinary. He's such a massive man. And I think he's got a lot more confidence than he had before. Stipe Miocic is getting older. He's proved a lot of people wrong with a comeback against Daniel Cormier and 2 wins in a row to complete the trilogy. But I do think the fascination and the interest does focus in completely on Ngannou, because there's something about him. I mean, Ngannou against Jon Jones, Ngannou against Stipe Miocic, Ngannou against Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury in a crossover fight. There's something about Ngannou, carrying this amazing story from Batie, Cameroon, where he was a 12-year-old kid digging in the quarry to make ends meet, to make money for his parents, and his story where he goes to France and he has a tough life on the streets. All these things. It's an amazing story.
When we talk about the Stipe Miocic legacy in the UFC, you mentioned the stats there, the record number of consecutive title defenses, of title wins in the heavyweight, title wins in matches at heavyweight. Is it simply that he's so good that he's unspectacular that perhaps counts against him, in the sense that people aren't unequivocally lauding him perhaps how they should?
Stipe's a part-time fireman, isn't he? And he works doing a lot of civic duty. He's incredibly modest. It's so hard to get him to talk about himself. He says the toughest person in his household is his wife, who he'd never kind of like, he would never get on the wrong side of. He talks about himself as a big softie at heart, and that when he's in the emergency services station, like they all take the mickey out of him. He's no one special. He's from Cleveland, Ohio. He's a proper blue collar guy. So he doesn't sell himself very hard. I mean, he's a great guy, Stipe. I've met him so many times. He's a great guy. He's got a great team around him. They're all very blue collar, but they don't scream and shout about themselves on social media. They don't sell themselves really hard. So I think he goes in there and he fights a certain way. He was a brilliant wrestler. At college, he was a Golden Gloves champion as a boxer. He's a massive human being, and he does everything very well. He's not particularly fast. He hasn't got amazing hand speed, but everything he does is solid. So he's solid rather than spectacular. And being so big and so solid and formidable in all these skill sets has eventually taken him to the top of the heavyweight division in the UFC and got him to break all the records. And he's beaten Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, Cain Velasquez, all these guys, as I say, Cormier twice, all the guys he's needed to beat to show he's the very best. I mean, I would say, and I'm not being critical of the heavyweight division in the UFC, Ed, but there is at times a lack of depth to it. And I think if he beats Ngannou a second time here, there aren't many other great heavyweights out there for him to fight.
Does Jon Jones excite you, though, in that context, as he's shaking up a little bit with him coming up?
Oh, totally. Jon Jones fighting all of them. Jon Jones fighting the top 10 is interesting because you want to see how he goes against Rosenstruck or like the young up-and-comers, or against Stipe, against Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones. I mean, that is such a thrilling fight because you just know that if any of those heavyweights lands on Jones, they'll knock him out. No one's managed to knock Jones out, let alone down. So at light heavyweight 205, but it's a 60-pound weight differential up from the weight division he was fighting in before. That's why there's been talk at times about having a heavyweight and a super heavyweight division in MMA, because it's a 60-pound differential, it can be. So, but that's the sport. Yeah, Jon Jones against either of those two is really exciting. Jon Jones against all of them is exciting, frankly, because he's got such a huge frame. I'd say a very similar equation is, we've just seen it at the weekend in boxing. If Lawrence Okoli unifies the cruiserweight division in boxing, it'll be fascinating to see what he can do at heavyweight. Lawrence Okoli against Deontay Wilder, does that not excite you? So that's what Jon Jones against someone like a Ngannou is, or against a Stipe Miocic. So yeah, he enlivens the division. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, fantastic matchup. It's interesting you mentioned the size factor there. Ngannou is the bigger man. I think in the first encounter, he was 20 pounds heavier or thereabouts. It didn't stop Miocic shooting on him throughout from the very start. He won by a very clear margin, didn't he? Unanimous decision all round. I think there was a 10-8 round with a couple of judges in there as well. Are you surprised the bookmakers then make Ngannou the favourite, or are they going by the theory that he catches Stipe in that first round, which is where Ngannou typically wins?
Totally. I mean, he did give, if you remember, he gave Stipe, it was a rough sail for that first 5 minutes. And you thought, wow, he clips him again here and he's gone. It's whether, that's what I'm saying. Can Stipe enact what he did the last time and get Ngannou down? He will have worked, it's 2 years ago, remember, he'll have worked and worked and worked on his takedown defense. He only needs to keep the fight standing for half of the 25 minutes, and he's going to get an opportunity to blow Stipe away. And Francis has got a really good chin as well, but you can't write Stipe off timing Ngannou as well. But no, I do think Ngannou is favourite. I'm picking Ngannou to win this fight. I just think it's his time. I really do.
What a remarkable story it is, given that sort of exit from Cameroon and how long it took him to get out of the country across Africa and up to Paris as well. And then he sort of took up his combat sports career with gusto. But what about talking about the takedowns, or the attempted takedowns of Stipe Miocic, the addition of Kamara Usman to the training camp with Ngannou, working with him, and also he's going to be in the corner on fight night. How significant is that? What does that say about Ngannou's approach?
Brains trust, I say. It's a very smart move. Listen, he might be 100 pounds heavier than him, but Kamara Usman, again, the Nigerian nightmare, as he calls himself, has shown the perfect style for that makes you that creates the percentages up to the 100% of that makes you win in MMA. Great chin, brilliant cardio, smothering wrestling, ability to strike as well. He knows exactly how not to be taken down as well. Francis will have been drilling and drilling and drilling with Kamara. Kamara will have been getting into positions to say, look, here's the traps that Stipe is trying to set for you. He wants you to shoot over him so he can get under and take you down. Keep your legs in this position. Keep your base strong. Kamara Usman will have played a great part in educating Francis just to not allow himself into that position of vulnerability. I just have an instinct with Francis from what we've seen in the last 18 months that he's worked it out. He's not overeager. He's going to take his time, and a big crunching uppercut or a right cross, I can just see it. I can just see the knockout this time. I'm not saying I'm Mystic Mac or see into the future, G-Man, but I can see the knockout for Francis Ngannou. You can get me on next week, and you can pull my cheeks apart like that if you want to. Yeah, you were wrong, G. You were wrong. But I just think he's going to get the job done.
Yeah, not to be contentious or incendiary, but do you think that's Dana? Is that Dana White's dream outcome? Do you feel Ngannou against Jon Jones? Is that potentially the sort of the money fight?
Oh yeah, of course it is. That because they will look so good next to each other. But regardless, if it's Jon Jones against Stipe, it'll still be fascinating. But I tend to agree with you. In the promoter's dream, the matchmaker's dream, Ed, will be Francis Ngannou as the champion against Jon Jones, because it's going to do astronomical numbers, frankly.
Just wanted to quickly mention, because you've mentioned boxing as well, and there is a big rematch this weekend for Dillian Whyte against Alexander Povetkin in Gibraltar as well. The same night, a few hours before the Miocic Ngannou fight. That's been mooted in the past, hasn't it? Ngannou against Dillian Whyte, because of Ngannou's boxing background, because Dillian has some MMA background and kickboxing background. Is that something that you can envisage happening down the line, even a 1-on-1, one in the cage, one in the ring kind of scenario?
I think if Francis Ngannou fights anyone, it'll be Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua. You've got Cameroon against Nigeria. I know he's a Nigerian Brit. I don't want to be perceived in the wrong way, but obviously Anthony Joshua has a relationship with Nigeria as well. I mean, imagine that. The rumble in Lagos, between those two. I'd fly over for that one, no question. And maybe they could do one MMA and one boxing match. But Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou as well. I mean, as you say, the Rumble on the Rock this weekend, it's more of a WWE name for White Povetkin or Povetkin White 2. With everyone being housed on a giant ship, a casino ship just off Gibraltar. It's all set up for a great night. I think it's on Sky Box Office, isn't it?
It is, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's interesting you mentioned that, though, because I thought in terms of credible cross-promotional matchups or cross-sport matchups, it seemed viable because of Dillian's background, that he's had a couple of MMA fights, because Francis was primarily a boxer. But you feel that would Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua ever get into a cage? Because I think Dillian's indicated he would.
Tyson Fury's talked about it before, and he's even sparred with world kickboxing champions and stuff, and I've spoken to him about it before, that he'd definitely do an MMA fight. So I could see it happening, and
because Ngannou's a striker, as well, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason why Floyd Mayweather against Conor McGregor was so successful was because they were the two most marketable figures from each of the sport, and they were around the same weight division. I think, I'm not decrying that Dillian Whyte isn't marketable, because he is. Let's see what happens on Saturday night, first of all. But I think if Dillian had beaten Anthony Joshua, beaten Povetkin, and he gets a fight with Anthony Joshua as world champion, then I could really see it. But at the moment, for me, it'd be either Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou, or Jon Jones. Come to that, yeah.
Well, lots of permutations.
Maybe they have a kind of a tag match. Who knows?
Lots of WWE there. Lots of permutations. To conclude, you are going for Francis Ngannou. Is that correct? And how?
Late second round, early third round knockout. Maybe even in the first round. But I think I favour Francis Ngannou second round knockout, and I think Dillian Whyte will do it late against Povetkin on the Rock. Gareth, pleasure to have your company as ever. Thank you very much for your insight. And remember, for more MMA content, thank you for watching. By the way, head to skysports.com. Goodbye for now.